Welcome to this edition of Spectrum of the Arts. Art camps have become very popular for many Pinellas County School students. Funded by the referendum, they provide for extended learning opportunities at a drastically accelerated pace.
We do focus on different media, during the school year. We have a curriculum that we follow, and it's based on units of study by media. So the children are already familiar with a lot of these areas, but the fact that they can work on it for an extended period of time rather than that little short 45 minutes allows them to kind of get into that art zone. Because usually in the classroom we start something and then it's, oh, time to clean up, and that's kind of just when they're starting to get into it and they don't want to stop. So it's allowing them more time to dig in a little bit deeper. It's giving them art from 5 different perspectives because we have 5 teachers in the room, kind of circulating, helping out, giving suggestions, encouraging them. So there's a lot more one-on-one. I would say that's a big thing.
There was a new look to the visual arts camp at McMullen Booth Elementary this year.
And now this year, for the first time, we're kind of blazing a new trail here. It's a traditional media camp where the students work with traditional art supplies. We're focusing on 5 different media. We're doing drawing, painting, fiber arts, printmaking, sculpture, and we did a digital art lesson on an iPad. So we're in those 5 areas. It's a lot to cover in 4 days, we're discovering.
This year's camp featured 5 instructors, one of which was Ellen Darjanat, who worked with students, teaching cartooning concepts.
They love that connection to cartoons, and they love that they can break rules and, go off with color, and so it works out really well. But I do a PowerPoint introducing them to an artist, contemporary artist, Jim Rizzi. I did show them some work by Pablo Picasso of his faces, and we kind of looked and analyzed sort of what kind of technique did he use, what things did he incorporate into his painting of the faces, which ended up sort of bringing it together to black outline, bold colors. So we compared and contrasted a little bit, and so then I went off on that to them creating their own character. I said, now it's your turn, and I do a lot with little stubby black crayon to make them work big and newsprint. And kids will just, if you give them pencil, they'll have that pencil point. They'll be small, just by the nature of the tool, but also they're erasing, because they can. And you don't want to do that. You want them to be loose. So I like them to have the large newsprint paper, and I said, I want you to just work big, try this out, try these shapes out, and just get your juices growing. And of course I demonstrate numerous big shapes and how we can use a triangle. I talk about villains. I talk about a character who is an angry character or mean or villainous and might have pointed chin or sharp edges, pointy body parts, and how the eyebrows would look. So I do an introduction with just pretty much cartooning, how you do the eyes, how you make the eyes look a certain way, what kind of noses there might be. So we talk about, really look at and connect to the cartooning part of the lesson, of bringing that together.
It was an action-packed event, as attested to by some of the campers.
There aren't the constraints of it has to be real life. And I think as soon as you take that away, especially when you get in 4th and 5th grade, they get very, ooh, I can't do that. They think the teacher's work, and I particularly back off and don't like to show my work. I usually like to show another class as we move along, samples anonymously from another class that are 5th graders or 4th graders that they can more relate to, and we'll talk a little bit about what works, what doesn't work that way. But this project, it really is big shapes. It's a lot of easy shapes. That's the whole way I teach kindergarten to draw, is using simple shapes. And first we trace them, and then we free draw those shapes, and then we build from that. So it's keeping the 5th graders relaxed so that they will be open to create. And they're sort of feel invited they can do this. They feel more invited they can do it. It's safe. You know, when you have it open-ended so that they can create their own, and you have it with shapes or building blocks that they can do, you know, as soon as they have a little bit of success, then they just, you know, it just builds on, you know, being more self-assured about it, and they do great.
Perhaps go back over and clean your edges when that's dry, maybe with the crayon.
Okay.
But I love her. Are you going to bring the curls back into her hair with the black crayon? I would do that. That's great. And her eyebrows.
We've actually, believe it or not, compacted in this 4-day art camp. They're actually having as much time as they have throughout the entire school year. School year's chopped into little 45-minute segments, 1 week, 1 week, 1 week, 1 week. Well, we've got 24 hours in 4 days with these children. So it's a lot more intense. You can dive in deeper because you don't have that time lapse of a whole week in between working on something.
Every morning we warm up by drawing, so we could do like more stuff, like more serious things in the afternoon. So we draw in the morning and then do more stuff in the afternoon. I was drawing like dogs and puppies, and yeah, we drew them at a letter of letters. I learned how to sew. I learned how to draw new things. I made a puppy, and I sewed like things onto him. So it's cute.
McMullen Booth Principal Susan Manch summed up the compact conditions experienced by the campers.
This is a year's worth of art instruction in 1 week. So just to give the kids that are showing that love of art beyond what every other child shows, that opportunity to have that extra art, and it comes to them without a charge. So some of our kids who might not be able to afford to go to art camps on their own are given that opportunity to have that extra touch of art and be exposed to a year's worth of learning. We're using the referendum money to support this camp happening for all of our kids. So this is an opportunity a lot of them would not have had without their support. So we really appreciate it. Today, learning is all about having engaged kids who are self-directed in their learning. And you just walk around and you see what these kids have been doing this week. There's no downtime. They're all engaged and so student-centered in everything they're doing. So that's huge.
So happy for our students that they have this opportunity. It's open to all the children in the county. They're actually running 3 weeks of art camps, a digital and a traditional media in the North County, South County, and Mid County. So there's plenty of opportunities for kids, depending on where they live, to pick the camp of their choice. I'm so fortunate that I live in this community that supports the arts, and I say a big thank you.
Alex Mack, a 2B fifth grader at McMullen Booth, is one of those students who would seem to be a perfect match for the camp such as this.
I really love art. I am obsessed with art, actually. I like doing everything. I love everything about it. I would say I sort of like sometimes digital, sometimes usually visual. I usually like to use painting and drawing because I'm way better drawing with my hand than anything else. Definitely visual, better than digital. Like, I don't like full digital because, you know, I definitely draw better by hand. I don't draw bad. I mean, I don't draw bad with digital, but I draw better definitely with hand. I've done oil pastels, we've done paintings, we've done just doodling, we've done warm-up drawings and stuff, as well as a little bit of digital art on the iPad, but we drew something with our hand first, and then we took a picture of it. I think once I get into college, I think I know which college I want to go to. I would want to go one that is for an architect because I'm good at drawing 3D shapes, and I mean, I love building stuff too. I'm obsessed with it.
Meanwhile, a digital arts camp was on the calendar for late spring at Azalea Middle School. Karen Santangelo filled us in on what it was all about.
It's a digital art camp, and the advantages I see for students, which there's more advantages than I even realized till after I talked to the students. Many of them are very talented, but they don't even get the opportunity to take art at their school because of other core subjects that they have to take, or they're involved in music, which is another wonderful elective. But there are so many electives at a middle school, they don't have the opportunity to really experience all of them. So this is an opportunity for them, if they are artistic, and even if they aren't, they can learn from it. But the ones that are artistic, they're thriving here because it's something that they would like to do all year, but they don't have that opportunity. So that's definitely an advantage. And it's an advantage for the teachers because there's 5 teachers at every camp, and we're singletaries at our schools in middle school. There's 157 art teachers in the county, and at the middle schools, except for John Hopkins, they have the advantage of having 2 art teachers. We're just alone at our schools, so this is a great opportunity. That's actually a learning opportunity for us to see how other people present different elements of art and principles of design, and just how they run their program as opposed to how you run art, I run mine. And so there's advantages to that of seeing how other people teach.
Students are definitely more towards digital these days. In fact, some of my students know how to use the digital devices more than I do, and they actually taught me how to use layers. So today when I was teaching and incorporating layers, a student of mine taught me this a few months ago. So I thought that was really cool. That's something that she had taught me is something now that I'm teaching other students. I think students do still use traditional art forms, but it's definitely more towards the digital, which is why I wanted to teach this lesson and talk about the importance of digital versus traditional and how it is really cool and interesting, but there's also some aspects that you can't get when you're using traditional mediums.
We've been working on like comics right now, and like earlier we were working on photoshopping and everything.
My mom was kind of like wondering why I'm just like at home all day, just relaxing, doing nothing. So she looked up online for some camps, and she thought I would like this one because I like technology and stuff like that. So she found this camp. I think it's opened more opportunities for me to like look for different camps and different types of maybe schools or programs like that for technology and art, because I'm starting like the digital art now.
My friend, she was having a lot of difficulty figuring out how to do some of the stuff, and I was like, oh, you have to do this, and then you do this, and then she was like, oh, right, okay, thank you. And then I helped her, and I was having a lot of difficulty at the beginning, but then I had the teachers helping me.
Sometimes I do get a little worried that they're so into technology and so into this digital art realm that they don't want to paint, they don't want to draw, they don't want to sketch, but that's why we're here and that's why we teach a variety of mediums in our classroom. So I do teach a digital art class, but when I begin that course, I start with traditional mediums. So we use charcoal, we do sketches, we talk about value, and we talk about all the elements of art through traditional mediums, and then we move on to digital art. So I feel like you need traditional as a foundation to get to digital art.
I wish we could do this more often. I think it would be great if we could do it during spring break even, not just during the summer, if we could do it during the holidays, because it's really great for the teachers amongst us. We love this. Like if we could have 2 art teachers in every school, that would be great, because it's just so much fun and we learn so much from each other.
We start with traditional process work in the digital art camp. So it's very important to keep the traditional involved. So they start off with quick sketches and idea boards, idea banks. So they're working on paper in the beginning, and then we transfer that information into digital mode. So they're doing both. The digital painting, the students have to really get in their head a lot about combining layers, digital layers on their iPads. So we go outside, they're taking real references from nature with maybe note-taking or quick sketches, and then we use photography to capture some images. Back in the classroom, they're looking at those and combining them with layers to organize landscape and real space, foreground, middle ground, background. So it's a good task for them to perceive space and perspective. I am fortunate to be working with this camp. It's a great opportunity for the students in Pinellas County. The referendum money pays for it. It's free, and it's an opportunity for multiple teachers. We have 4 teachers here for 25 kids. So we have the student-teacher ratio is outstanding. They're in here all day. We can get a lot of work done in a big time period with a lot of one-on-one help.
One of the apps that we use is ArtRage, and so a lot of traditional media that you use, like oil paint and watercolor or airbrush, pastels, those are all in that app. So it makes it very easy to transition from using traditional forms of it and then using it digitally on the iPad. And it has different settings where you can change it so you get the effect that you want, just like you would using it on paper or on a canvas.
You guys may go back to work.
We're trying to get the students to realize that there is a connection between traditional artwork and digital. So sometimes I like to think that digital is so much easier because it is used on technology and tablets, which they are used to, but it's really so similar to painting and drawing, which we do a lot in our classroom throughout the school year. So I think it helps us to connect those dots for them and to teach them new techniques that they can use later on. We have kids at a whole bunch of different levels. So we have some who aren't exposed to using a lot of technology, whether it's at home or it's at school. And then we have kids who come in and they're like, oh yeah, I can show you how to do that. And they're able to help us, which is excellent because then we can show the other kids. But I don't think we ever get to a point in the camp where any kid is going to say, oh, well, I know everything now and I don't need you to show me, because there's so much that you can do on the iPads and so many different programs and applications that can transform and manipulate artworks into different ways. I think this camp is wonderful for all of the teachers because we really learn so much from each other and we're able to inspire each other, whether it's a new project or a classroom management technique that we don't use in our classroom or something that can help.
You may recall earlier this year, we took you to the St. Petersburg waterfront for a brief look at the collaborative effort on the part of Douglas L. Jamerson Elementary and St. Petersburg High School students. It resulted in a brilliant display of some of St. Petersburg's grand history. We thought we'd expand upon that presentation today with a closer look at the murals and the role each depiction plays as we look back over decades of time. Rue Ferreras is our host.
Well, a couple years ago, we actually had Derek Donnelly, one of the local mural artists, paint a mural on the side of our wall of an iconic St. Petersburg postcard. And we had some students from throughout Pinellas County do a little children's wall on our lower wall. So we decided we wanted to change it up a little bit, and we talked about what kind of imagery we'd like, and we decided we wanted to tell a story of St. Pete through art. So we talked to Jenny Trewin at St. Pete High, who contacted some of the kids at Jamerson Elementary as well, and she brought out St. Pete High artists, students, and Jamerson students. Went through postcard after postcard, picked out the right images, and they started painting. Well, this image here is Mr. Sun. He was brought to St. Petersburg by a local photographer and was adopted by the St. Pete Chamber of Commerce. So probably for about 60 years now, that has been one of the iconic advertising images of St. Petersburg. And it's followed by the train. St. Petersburg became St. Petersburg when Peter Demens brought the Orange Belt Railway into what was at that time Wardsville. So on June 8th, 1888, the Orange Belt Railway arrived with a locomotive called the Matty, and from that point forward, we grew as a city and became St. Petersburg. And of course, one of our first known is the Mirror Lake Library. It was actually built with Carnegie money when Carnegie gave the millions of dollars to further education and build libraries in communities that didn't have libraries. We received part of that money, and it just celebrated its centennial last year, so it's 101 years old. The OpenAir post office, this was a model post office. It was the first one built like this in the country. And there was a lot of people involved, a lot of business leaders to help raise the money to buy the land and build this post office. And it just celebrated its centennial as well. And it's still in operation on the corner of 4th Street and Central, 1st Avenue North as an actual post office. The Tsarina Hotel was our first $1 million hotel built in St. Petersburg. It was probably the granddaddy of all our hotels until the Vinoy was built. Then in the late 80s, early 90s, was actually imploded to make room. It used to be located on Beach Drive. And of course, our world famous shuffleboard courts. We are the world's largest shuffleboard club. And for years, that whole area around Mirror Lake, whether it was shuffleboard, chess, checkers, lawn bowling, it was kind of our sports recreational location for people, and all the things were outdoors. Even the checkers club and the chess club, everybody played outside because of our wonderful weather here in the wintertime. And it's had this great resurgence. It's pretty hip now. I mean, if you ever go there on Friday night, they have Friday night shuffle and the place is packed. The Colosseum opened in 1926, and it was basically a big band jazz dance hall. There were a number of them built like it around the country. From my understanding, I think there's only 2 of them that survive, and we have one of them. This is kind of like the Amalie Arena of the day. Anybody that was anyone in the music world, when they came in concert, always performed at the Colosseum. A lot of famous blues and jazz acts, and of course the big band acts that went there, from the 1920s on. And of course, good old St. Petersburg High School. And this is actually the 3rd location for St. Pete High. This is the current location, the building that is on 5th Avenue North, and it also opened in 1926. The 1920s was probably our largest, until today, our largest economic boom period, and the growth of construction was amazing. And when this school was built, it was known as the $1 Million High School because it was our first school that cost $1 million to build, and the state of Florida couldn't understand why we wanted to build this school way out in the middle of farms out there on 5th Avenue and 25th Street, but there it sits. It opened in 1926. And then, of course, the $1 Million Pier. This also opened in 1926. We had a number of piers throughout our history. The original purpose, or the original desire of St. Petersburg, was to be a port city. And that's why Peter and Menz decided to bring the railroad here, because they were going to construct a number of piers out to Tampa Bay and turn this into a huge shipping port facility, basically. Luckily, when William Straub came to St. Petersburg and bought the St. Pete Times, he convinced the city council that we didn't need to be Tampa or any other port city. We needed to be this amazing, beautiful, park-filled recreational city. This pier was built, the hurricane of 1921 pretty much destroyed the waterfront. That was the last time we had a direct hit here. And the piers prior to this were all wooden. This was a concrete pier that was built. And the Spanish-style building is what we became famous for, the architecture of Mediterranean Revival. And it was, like I said, opened in 1926. It survived until 1967 when the actual building was torn down. In 1972, the inverted pyramid was built on that same spot. And just a few years ago, the entire structure, the inverted pyramid and the pier itself, was demolished to make room for the new St. Pete Pier that's supposed to open in the fall of 2019. And here we go. This is the grand lady of downtown St. Petersburg, the Vinoy Hotel. Amir Vinoy Lofner built this hotel. It actually opened on December 31st, 1925. He wanted it to open for New Year's Eve. They had this great, huge celebration, and it sat at the edge of our waterfront for years as our premier hotel. Went through some rough times like all of downtown St. Petersburg did in the 1970s and 80s. And then luckily was saved and refurbished and remodeled to the amazing hotel that it is today. This structure is known as the Snell Building or the Snell Tower. Perry Snell bought this corner. It was owned by a realtor by the name of Noel Mitchell, who was one of our former mayors. And he tore down the building that was originally there and built this structure. At the time that it was built in the 1920s, it was the tallest building in St. Petersburg, and it still stands today. And if you ever go there and look at it and you stand on the sidewalk and look up, the architecture is amazing. A lot of it is all hand-carved stone all the way up. And the people, when they walk along the sidewalks, it's on the corner of Central Avenue and 4th Street, what they don't realize when they look down and they see glass blocks is that this building has a basement under the entire building, and at night when the basement is lit up, the light shines through the blocks onto the sidewalk, so it illuminates the sidewalk. And it still has one of the few arcades that are left. The Snell Arcade cuts through the middle of the building, connecting Central Avenue with the alley to the north of it. And that arcade alone was just a masterpiece of art. Perry Snell spent nearly $1 million bringing in everything from Cuban tile, Italian tile, beautiful mosaic of Venice, all kinds of different statuary from Italy, and it itself was almost like an art museum walking through the arcade. Now we have anybody that lived in St. Petersburg prior to 1980 remembers Web City. Web City was a dream. A guy by the name of James Earl Doc Webb moved to St. Petersburg in 1926, opened up a little drugstore, continued to expand it, and he was a marketing genius. He was way ahead of his time and nearly everything that he did. He went from a little drugstore to a shopping and entertainment mecca that was about 7 square blocks of the city, from 9th Street all the way to about 5th and 6th Street, and from 2nd Avenue south to about 5th Avenue south. It had parking lots, it had 77 different stores. It was a mall before anybody knew what a mall was. And of course it was famous for its live mermaid show and dancing chickens, which were on the 4th floor that entertained everybody for years here in St. Petersburg. We talked about the $1 Million Pier earlier. This is the structure that was built to replace it in 1972. And the actual original structure, people remember the inverted pyramid before it was knocked down, and it had a bunch of retail on the ground level. The original structure didn't have that, and the reason of its design was so it was modern obviously for that time period of the early 1970s, but you could stand on the waterfront and literally look through the building and still see the water. That's why it was designed in that nature. And of course we have the Trop, home of the Tampa Bay Rays. And the structure has sat there, well, the Rays have been here for 25 years-ish, and on the old gas plant area, and hopefully it'll still be there for a few more years for the baseball team. And of course the Sunshine Skyway, and this bridge is magnificent to drive over. It's more magnificent to look at at night, the way that it's lit. It is not the first Sunshine Skyway. There was the original Sunshine Skyway was struck by a freighter in 1980, and it took down part of the main span. So the decision was made to build a new bridge, a new modern bridge that could be better protected from ships. That was a little higher as well. And it was when it was constructed, it was not only this magnificent bridge, but also like a modern piece of art used in architecture. It was very beautiful to see this bridge. Well, you can't go anywhere in St. Petersburg, especially along the downtown waterfront, without seeing our pelicans, our brown pelicans, the official bird of St. Petersburg. They're a mainstay here along the waterfront and on all the pilings and on what was the $1 Million Pier, soon to be the St. Pete Pier. Anywhere you see our advertising, even all the new hip kind of retro-y kind of things that people are doing with t-shirts and stuff like that. I mean, you know, this has been our image, this Pelican, which we hold dear here to our hearts in St. Pete. We've been sharing, you know, the story of the Sunshine City for 96 years here at the Museum of History, and this has been a really cool way to share the story of our history.
That's it for now. We hope you've enjoyed our program, and we invite you to join us on our next Spectrum of the Arts. I'm Jonathan Ogle. We'll see you next time.